We may see an increase in retrenchments due to the recent rate hike cycle. Businesses may have to cut staff due to higher lending rates. So let's find out what recourse workers have when it comes to layoffs from Labour Law consultant Tony Healy joining me this morning right here on Newslink. Thank you so much, Tony, for your time. Good morning to you. We'll get into the employees in just a moment. Let's talk about the employers, because I think oftentimes when we see repo rate hikes, the focus is on either the consumer or the employees, but surely there's an impact on the employer's liquidity whenever, rate hikes are announced. So what does that impact look like, first and foremost, on the employer?
Good morning, Jamila. Yes, absolutely. Well, two things happen when interest rates go up as far as employers are concerned. Firstly, the cost of debt and the cost of money goes up for funding. And secondly, their cash flow can be impacted upon because they're repaying interest on those debts and on those loans. So there is a two-pronged impact, if you like, Tumelo, on interest rate hikes on employers, and that impacts on their ability to spend money on other things like remuneration, for example.
So when we talk about then the employees, surely their job security in the process is also under threat.
It is indeed, and we're in a heightened increase cycle, and I think there's a general nervousness amongst employers. We see it amongst our client base. We have problems with energy reliance, electricity, some services and water in certain circumstances, and of course the increased interest rate cycle. So all of these put pressure on employers when it comes to their day-to-day costs.
So, Tony, what does the law say just in terms of, what processes the employer needs to take before making that difficult decision to consider retrenchments? This could be for various reasons, whether they include economic, technological, structural, whatever needs the employer currently has leading to that decision to retrench. But surely there are due processes then to be followed.
Yeah, very much so. And the Labour Relations Act in Section 189 lays those out. And they're quite clear. And if you were to simplify them, you would say that employers need to go through a consultation process with potential retrenchees before any decision can be made regarding their retrenchment. So that would mean confirming in writing that the employer's retrenchment is being contemplated, including certain information in that correspondence. Number two, embarking upon what we call a joint consensus-seeking process to see if there can be any agreement reached on the contemplated retrenchment. And if not, and if no agreement is reached, only then is the employer entitled to make a retrenchment decision.
Yeah. So in other words, they also have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that they've consulted vigorously. They have considered all other solutions, and they had absolutely no choice but to retrench.
Yes, after having ensured that they can show that they've listened to the employer and given all of the employee's proposals and submissions, taken those into consideration and given them a response to that input from the employee.
Yeah. Just talking about the employees now, Tony, what usually then happens to the employees? So you receive that email or that letter that you're possibly facing retrenchment. What does an employee do next?
Well, they need to go through the document very carefully, make sure the employer has included all the information that they need to include, and then take the trouble to then plan how they're going to propose ways of how, for example, their proposed retrenchment can be avoided. If it can't be avoided, how the proposed retrenchment could be delayed. And if the retrenchment can't be avoided, what kind of severance pay and other input could be and should be received from the employer if they were to be retrenched. So those are the primary agenda items for consultation. How to avoid the proposed retrenchment, how to delay it if possible, and what severance pay should be paid.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No worries. So just before I let you go then, Tony, because we're talking about the impact of retrenchments due to rate hikes, surely the South African Reserve Bank now has a balancing act here to do. This dealing with inflation, balancing inflation, but also considering the needs of the nation's economy. So it's not just an overnight decision they have to take. They have to consider the ripple effect this will then have between the employer and the employee.
Absolutely. Really, it is a balancing act. How
Yeah.
do they protect the interests of employers and employees and Treasury in general and the macroeconomic system when they make these rate hike or rate reduction decisions as they do from time to time?
We'll leave it there, Tony. Thank you so much for adding your voice to this. Hopefully this conversation helpful to an employer or employee out there currently going through the same scenario. Tony Healy joining us, labour law consultant on matters regarding retrenchment, but also due to interest rate hikes that obviously have a knock-on effect on both the employer and the employee.